What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of SSPN Postgame. I'm Jude, that's Ethan. We're here to talk some Spurs with you tonight. And Ethan, when I got on the restream room before we got on air, I told you, I was like, well, this is just like another night watching Spurs basketball. It was a little bit different than how the other games have been going, but inevitably turns out to have the same ending, with just the Spurs staying competitive for most of it and then falling off there in the fourth quarter. There was about a 14-point run that the Bulls made, about the 8-minute mark, I want to say, is where it started. Really pulled away. If you just look at the numbers from quarter to quarter, it was a pretty tight one. Even going into the fourth, the Bulls did make a little bit of the run there at the end to win the third quarter 28-26, but was still only a 5-point game. I believe 100-95 or 95-90, one of those two. But then in the fourth quarter, the Bulls started how they finished, playing even better defense. 38-19, they won the fourth quarter to run away with this one to get a 128-104 lead. They started out 39-28. The Spurs bounced back with the 31-23 second quarter. And then I already told you how the second half went. And really just there were some bench guys that didn't have their best game tonight. Zach had a little bit of an off game. Doug didn't shoot that great. But I don't really think that was necessarily the reason that the Spurs lost. You could say that for Jay Rich as well. It was just, once again, we're running a lot of Blake Wesley off the bench right now. Isaiah Roby got 15 minutes tonight as well. So we're running those two guys in our rotation when normally those guys wouldn't play if we didn't have the injuries we have right now. And then on top of that, when you talk about, the loss of Sohan defensively and with, how solid he was playing before he went out. While it was nice to see how they competed and it was endearing because of the injuries and it was kind of unexpected, it ended up having the same the same result regardless of that, Ethan, if that whole spiel makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it felt like the lottery gods were like, you guys have played well tonight, but we're going to give you that loss that we know you want, at heart.
Greater good.
Yeah, exactly. The first quarter was all Chicago. It felt like we were getting good looks. They just weren't falling. And then the second and third quarter, it felt like the Spurs had all the momentum. I mean, you basically said it. Our shots started to fall. We had a lot more cohesion. The ball movement was crisp. Stanley Johnson was kind of our backup, along with Josh Richardson and Malachi, but he had a lot more facilitating duties that felt like had a very good game passing the ball, had a couple of hockey assists leading
Yeah.
to some great action.
He only took one shot tonight because of that.
But he was very effective, I felt. Malachi looked very comfortable. We texted back and forth about it. It looks very confident. I know he went 6 for 18, not the most efficient game in the world, but every shot felt like a good shot, at least until maybe the very end of the game. We were kind of chucking up shots. But for the most part, I was very pleased with how he played. Keldon had 21 points, 8 for 12, missed both of his threes, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. Not crazy numbers, but it felt like to me he really was pivotal as far as kind of getting that momentum in that second and third quarter, finishing amongst the trees, kicking out, being aggressive, exactly what we're looking for from Keldon. Mm-hmm. So I really don't have any complaints from him. What this loss boils down to me, Jude, is defensively we continue to struggle. Can't stay in front of anybody. Closing out too hard on guys that aren't shooters, not closing out on guys that are shooters. And that just leads to, our defense breaking down so easily. Yeah, and Chicago's big three was not Vooch, Levine, and DeRozan. I know statistically maybe it was, but tonight it felt like to me it was
statistically.
It was Ayo, Andre, and Kobe White, at least in my eyes.
Andre Drummond on the stats tonight, 9 for 9 with 21, 15, 3 steals, and a block. So he was the big three on the stat sheet too.
But Ayo and Kobe White, I felt played a phenomenal game.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe they only had, I think, 3 steals total, divided amongst themselves, because it felt like they were really getting after our guards, especially Blake and Malachi, really getting up inside of us, forcing a lot of turnovers and getting out in transition.
Ayo did a solid job on Blake. I noticed that too.
We had 6 more turnovers than they did. Obviously, that led to more points. They also out-rebounded us by 11. A lot of that probably because of Andre Drummond just ragdolling both of our centers.
Right.
But you're right. It was competitive for 3 quarters when then they just took off in that fourth quarter and we had no
How
chance
many
of catching
times
him.
have we seen that this year,
It it feels like it.
Right.
Every game at some point in the game, every game, we just completely give the other team all the momentum.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Talking about some other things just from tonight, playing off some of the stuff that you just talked about. Obviously, Andre Drummond really just, I mean, not only just in the fourth quarter, whenever they were pulling away, did him catching like three straight lobs just add
yeah.
to the
Oh,
energy in the building. But
he was
even
4.
before that, dude, he was pushing Jakob around like, and
Yeah.
Jakob kind of just gave up after a certain point. Like, I'm not even trying, I'm
Yeah.
not even blaming Jakob for that, considering the circumstances, because that
Mhm.
really didn't only happen until the fourth quarter. But it was like they had battled a little bit earlier, and then not only did you have the insult, like you had the injury with the dunks, right? And then you had
Mhm.
the insult with Drummond calling him like too small, like multiple times. Um, it was just that was something. I mean, that was his best game as a Bull. I had the Chicago broadcast. They were talking about that. I don't think this is his highest scoring game as a Bull, and I want to say this is his highest scoring rebounding game as a Bull too, or highest rebounding game.
Yeah.
We made him look like Detroit Drummond when
Yeah.
he got that big contract. So we got a little bit of a nostalgia there. And he really took over in that fourth quarter, plus 30 overall. That's nuts. Um, yeah, Vucevic. I felt like we played pretty good defense on him
Yeah.
in the first half. But then it was like, third quarter, he's making some buckets, and the next thing you know, he has 20 and 10. So, typical there too. I think we did a good job on DeRozan too, 8 for
Kata
17.
did.
Yeah, Kata did. Yeah, there were some. You can give some other thoughts on that as well. 8 for 17 overall. I don't know. Kind of just looking down the stat sheet, there really isn't too much else to say. I'm kind of realizing while I'm talking about it, for at least on the Bulls' perspective. Just talking about the Spurs a little bit more. I know I mentioned Zach had a bad game. It wasn't that. It wasn't anything he did. He played the same as he always does. He just didn't execute as well shooting wise. Um, so that's really all I'd have to say about Zach's performance. I don't think that's anything like we should get super worried about, on top of, kind of getting big bodied by Drummond and and Vucevic as well. Um, Talking about Malachi also, like if you just took out, the stat sheet, like at the end of the game where you're like, oh, this is kind of an inefficient numbers wise. If you just watched the game, he played a solid game. He just missed some shots tonight. Like,
Mhm.
but really he's, oh, considering he's had like two back-to-back 20-point games recently, he was going to have a game where the shots were just going to not, he wasn't going to be super efficient. He had a stretch of doing it for so long. Like that's just going to happen every once in a while. Like that he had 5 boards tonight. I think that's a career high. I know that's not super significant, but I noticed visibly watching the game that he was more active on the boards.
Mm.
Had 4 assists tonight as well. That's another thing I noticed just tonight. It was sparingly, and he actually got the most minutes on the team tonight with 32. But in the moments where he was taking the ball up the floor, not only did he have 4 assists, but I really like Malachi as a combo guard. Like that skill set has also developed, with his off ball shooting and being able to drive to the rim a little bit as well. But I think that he really is that ideal combo guard. Like he's a two, don't get me wrong, but I like his ability just taking the ball up the floor. He has a better, like whenever we had that super young lineup out there, he was the guy primarily taking the ball down the floor because he knows the offense the most.
Yeah.
So I like to just see that development there. That's good stuff that we saw tonight. And then just talking about Keldon a little bit, I know obviously not super active on the boards tonight, didn't really facilitate as well, but he was really just supposed to be a scorer, and Pop took him out early because we're trying to give the young guys run in a game that was once out of reach. So only 29 minutes for him tonight. Did miss his 2 wide open threes, but still good shots that he took and found a way to get 20 on efficient scoring. He had 8 of the Spurs opening 13 points, and then was a catalyst in that third quarter as well, to keep it competitive, when we started off hot there too. But that's really all I got to say about this one, Ethan. Not really too much, other than it was kind of just a backward script where instead of the Spurs starting out competitive, they kind of got blown out and then had to come back in it. The second half was still the same competitive third quarter and then get blown out in the fourth.
Yeah, literally the exact parallel of what we're used to, but still the same outcome. I was gonna say, one positive to take from this game, shot 94.1% from the free throw line. We only missed one free throw,
There you
and that
go.
was from Jakob Poeltl. Everyone else shot perfect, 16 for
Hmm.
17.
Just a comment here. Laura Latin says, I'm starting to think the next 2 years will not be much different. I don't see how we can just all of a sudden click and magic happens. Our defense is so bad.
Mm,
That's an interesting perspective. I think one, I would say that the draft pick, regardless of where it is, will help. Even if it gets like real rough and we get dropped down to like the lower top 10, we saw what we could do with Jeremy this year. So I think we'll still get somebody quality that will, and just another year of development from Devin and Keldon. That's the other key thing that just to remember throughout this whole stretch where we've been competitive and losing a lot is Devin's out too. So how many of those games, if he's playing, do we win? But that's also a good thing, when it comes to lottery odds. So it's like that's kind of something that, people might forget when they're
mm,
thinking about this. But I also see what you're saying. Like it's going to take time to build. Like it maybe, obviously if you get Wembenyama, you have a lot of high hopes, but like, right. The next year, the Spurs may not have any chance of making the playoffs. Like they still might not be where they need to be yet. But I would say the year after I'd have a lot of optimism, but I can totally see the thought there because the defense really does need a bunch of improvement. But I think when you kind of factor in a lot of the things going on this year, not only with just the state of the team, like we talked about it before on so many other lives, like where Doug is literally saying like on an in arena promo at the AT&T Center, we understand there's a bigger purpose this year. Like I think if guys have a little injury, we're going to let them stay out longer. Um, you know, on top of all of the other injuries that we've just had, like I feel like there's just been so much turmoil in the rotations even this year that we've kind of had. It's been hard to like have like a good evaluation of this team at full strength defensively. I think there's still definitely a lot of work that they've got to do. Um, but I'm not sure. It's still kind of hard to evaluate. But I definitely think that is a storyline that could bleed into next year and be the reason why the Spurs are in a similar position next season. If that answers her comment.
for sure, I think it does. I agree with what you're saying. We haven't really gotten a long stretch of games where we can truly see the defensive identity of this team with everyone playing with consistent rotations. Sohan obviously brings a lot to that. Trey Jones brings a lot to that. Devin Vassell brings a lot to that. And a lot of they've been out for a considerable amount of games this season, especially Devin. Bring in a hopefully Wembenyama or a Scoot, depending on or whoever we draft, doesn't
Right.
matter.
Top
Next
prospect.
season, yeah. To me, it's very obvious that the goal of this season. Um, I'm not trying to be wear my tinfoil hat
Right.
or whatever, but it's very clear that we're trying to lose.
The Spurs
Um,
will never admit it, but it's so
it's
obvious. Right.
very clear with the way injuries kind of pop up as we start kind of getting some momentum, and guys are up and out of the G League, and like
Devin
it's
maybe doesn't even get this procedure if this is like if this is a year where
we're
obviously this isn't a
pushing for the
team.
playoffs or something.
Right. He may just play through it because they just said it was a chronically sore knee. But
Yeah,
because of the state of this season, this is the exact season you want Devin to go get that and be out for however many months.
exactly. So I think next year's definitely going to be a struggle. 'Cause still, we'll probably still be in the lottery
Right.
next year,
No, it's
not
a
in the
very good point.
playoff chase. But I think we'll have a better idea of who we are because I don't think we will
I
take
agree.
another year to really tank. Like I think
Yeah.
everyone will be playing. We're going to try and find that identity and see what we have.
Yeah.
Because like, is Blake Wesley going to work out next year? He'll
Right.
probably get consistent minutes. Same with Malachi and
Another good
Sohan.
point.
Um, a lot of things that we'll be able to find out next year once everybody is healthy and ready to play in their consistent role.
Yeah, and just kind of touching on that a little bit more, another thing that kind of, plays into the evaluations as well is development and
Yeah.
like players reaching their potential because, if there's some crazy offseason jump in a specific category, like that could impact that as well. And even this year, like we've seen like kind of out of nowhere, Sohan turned the switch on and then the
Hmm.
defense was completely different because
Yep.
of his versatility and the way that he was playing. And also with him turning stuff on offensively, that opens up. I mean, he's hard to guard, two ways and deal with two ways. So the point is, as these young players get more new skills, And that keeps getting tacked on every day. Under Brett Brown and Greg Popovich, that can also kind of impact things, which it's kind of a wild card, if that makes sense.
And as much as I love the man, I think the absence of Doug McDermott from next season's team, more than likely,
Right.
will also improve things defensively, or that
Yep.
it should.
Yep. Our man Adrian C says we called off the stealth tank and transitioned
Yeah,
to the blatant
for
tank.
real. It's
Right.
pretty obvious.
And since then, it's like, what has happened during that time period? We've tied the Rockets. Like
Mhm.
we have the largest odds. So uh, that's what's happened for sure. Um, any other thoughts on this game, Ethan? I guess we can jump. Well, I guess these minutes don't really matter, but we can talk about the young guys' minutes. We can talk about Don Barlow getting in there. Also against the Sixers, we didn't really talk
Mhm.
much about that game as well. You were there. I guess talk about that Sixers game, and then we can kind of just talk about like these young guys.
Yeah, in terms of Don Barlow, I don't have too much to go on. He only played what,
Yeah.
like, total maybe 10 to 12 minutes both games.
Honestly, the Sixers game was more of like an evaluation because they had to
Yeah.
bring Embiid back in. Like you got more out of that one than you did this one.
He looks aggressive. He looks good moving laterally, as well as, being a force on the interior. A much better perimeter defender than I expected. Just his first couple games in the NBA,
Right.
he really sticks with guys pretty well. Um, but hasn't really had an opportunity to do much else. But I'm still holding out. He doesn't have any blatant deficiencies in these 12 to 15 minutes of play. Um, I felt Blake had a pretty good bounce back game against Philly. He had a 1-3, a couple shots. He looked comfortable. He finally got into his rhythm a little bit more. Didn't make as many mistakes in limited time. And yes, not too much to go on, but definitely a lot better than what he was doing in the past couple games, where he was really just a turnover machine and couldn't get anything going.
Yeah.
And in terms of this game, I only had 5 points, but he had 5 boards, which is great.
And 5
Um,
assists, I
I don't
believe.
think no, he had 1 assist.
Okay, read
He
that
hit
wrong.
he hit the 1-3 that he took. No, you're good.
Oh, yeah, definitely did.
But I felt like he had some pretty good moments defensively, some good help defense moments, a couple high IQ plays. I think early on he had like a 3-on 1 fast break where we got like
I
a
know what
long
you're talking
rebound and he
about,
just
that tough layup.
immediately pushed it. Yep,
Yep.
immediately pushed it. He knew I have 4 guys
Use the
behind me. I'm
speed.
taking it
He's
off.
fast. He's
He's
really
very
fast.
quick.
Yeah.
Um, he had a couple turnovers, so clearly he's not a finished product, but some
Same
positive signs.
in the Philadelphia game too.
Yeah.
That's the thing that is stuck with Blake since whether it's the G League or the actual Spurs right now is the turnovers. That's
Mhm.
really but that's kind of like his archetype though. Like
Yeah.
like as we've compared him to Tony and DeJounte throughout this season, like we're not saying he's going to be him, but he's very similar to them in the fact that he's a excuse me, score first point guard, right?
Yes.
Even like he's going to be a point guard, even though he is 6'5", so he can definitely play the two. We want to develop him as a point guard, but he kind of came in as a score first guy. So then like a lot of times he'll drive to the rim, and then there's, he's met with somebody like there's nothing there. He can't go up with it. It's either going to get blocked or he's going to get a charge. So then he's midair having to just try to make a decision and throw the ball somewhere. And a lot of
Yeah.
times that ends up turning into a turnover
Mhm.
for the Spurs. But I thought tonight was his best game since he's been back. Like since not, I know he had a better one early in the season when we saw him, but I felt like since he's been back and getting like a lot of these minutes, um, consistent minutes, really, I guess now that I think about it, only the Sixers game and this one, he's really got extended time. But
Mhm.
less mistakes from him tonight. Still the stuff that we're going to see, like that's going to continue to happen. Just we have to keep giving him reps. Like
Yeah.
we said with Malachi and Jeremy at the beginning of the year, and we've seen how they developed. Like Blake's got to go through that process. He's just starting in, January, February.
Yeah.
Um, but you saw the skills. I
Mhm.
mean, Doug even mentioned in a recent interview, like he said, Blake's one of the most talented players on the team. He just kind of doesn't know what he's doing right now, and he's figuring it out. And it felt like he had a little bit. It felt like there's been a jump mentally. I know
Mhm.
I'm kind of exaggerating off of like just this one Bulls game, but tonight it really felt like he knew where he needed to go more. That doesn't mean that
Yeah.
mistakes aren't still going to be there, but watching this one, it felt like he looked more comfortable. He's nowhere near as comfortable as where Malachi is, but
Mhm.
you can see like, okay, he. It felt like he caught on to some more things tonight.
I think he's finally figuring out at this point in his career, less is more as a ball
Right.
handler. He doesn't have to make an incredible
Yep.
play every single time. One thing that I have noticed about his playmaking ability as a point guard, and I always compare it to just like this is now the 2K generation of point guards, where
Right.
where it's like every not every pass has to be for an assist. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? So there's a lot
Yeah.
of times where he gets the ball and coming off a pick and roll or a handoff, he'll have somebody open for an opportunity to create different action or swing the ball, but he doesn't take those first passes because he's looking for that wide open roller or that wide open weak side corner
Yeah.
three, and they're not always there. So then he has to dribble it back out, and then it just takes up a lot of the time on the shot clock. And then now we're stuck in whatever, he has to dump it off to whoever, or he picks up the
Right.
ball, and that's where a lot of mistakes or a lot of turnovers because he's trying to force an assist when he should just move the rock. Maybe you'll get a hockey assist and then move the rock and cut. Because that's what
Right. Right.
Malachi's
Right.
gotten very good at. Move the rock and cut. And he's improved as an off ball player. So Blake just needs to make that small switch, and I think he'll be a lot better as far as a facilitator is concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, just talking a little bit more about Blake, you saw it with that fast break layup tonight. I mentioned the elite speed, but I mean, he's just got a burst off the dribble.
Yeah,
You
he
know
does.
that I mean, like I feel like once he's developed, dude, like he has the potential to just be like a walking bucket. Like a I mean, he's going to be I'm not trying to cap his ceiling here, but just as of right now, like what I'm thinking about like that pops off my head is kind of like a bigger Emmanuel quickly.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like they have that length, but he's going to
Yeah.
be able to pull up kind of in the mid range and get jumpers. Like if you go watch his Notre Dame highlights, like too, like you can just like he's a scorer. And so, yeah, once he gets a handle on the ball and he's not getting pickpocketed in lanes when he's driving through people, this is like, probably like some point next season. It's going to be a while until this happens.
Yeah.
But with just his natural ability and like skill and talent that he has, like I said, off the dribble drives like that, it's super explosive. Got a good jump shot. Yes, there's work, but the way that he's going to be able to shoot off the dribble as well as be a catch and shoot guy, and then on top of his potential or his excuse me, his defensive potential, on top of his defensive potential and his length.
Hmm.
Just a lot of intriguing stuff from Blake Wesley.
For sure.
His ceiling is very interesting because he's got a lot of talent for sure.
Hmm.
Um, Laura says, "I wish y'all had more content. You guys give good in depth
Aw.
analysis. Rob Trejo used to have good stuff, but he kind of felt. I know Rob. Rob, shout out to Rob Spurs
Yeah.
Tube TV. He helped us out a lot early in the channel, and I know he does. He's got
He's a
a
family man.
kid. Yeah, right. He's got a kid. Everything. So that's probably why. But shout out to him. MEZ says, I'm not worried one bit about Blake Wesley's mistakes. This is when you let him play through mistakes. This has to be one of the worst records. Who cares? Right. Yeah. No, I
Facts.
mean,
Yeah.
you want him to go out there and develop. And it's great to see the more minutes and the stuff that I was just talking about. You want him to get those reps because he has the ability to eventually do those type of things.
Yeah.
But I guess we can check in to the next game here, Ethan, as we're just around
Let's do it.
25 minutes. Preview that and then hop on out of here. So Spurs got Toronto on Wednesday. We know what
Ooh.
happened at the beginning of the year in that one, Ethan. That's one I won't forget.
Yeah.
143 to 100. And that was after the Spurs started 5-2. And that was the beginning of the tank, Ethan. It was the
Mhm.
reminder of who we are, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Dude, this game has a lot of interest in my eyes because it's one day before the deadline, and the two teams that have continued to be amongst these like random rumors have been the Raptors and the Spurs. So
Hmm.
both teams could look drastically different like the day before this game. Like Fred Van Vliet could become a net. Jakob Pertl could become a whatever. So it could be
Wait,
completely different rosters by the time this game actually tips off.
is tomorrow the trade deadline? I'm
No,
so
it's the
bad.
ninth. It's the
Okay.
ninth. It's the day
Okay.
after the Raptors game.
Okay, I
So
see
I
what you're
guess
saying.
technically it could be after the Raptors game, but in my storyline oriented brain, I would think it'd be a lot cooler for like 3 hours before the game tips off. It's like Jakob Pertl's on the move, Doug McDermott's on the move, Fred Van Vliet's on the move, and now these teams have to really figure it out, and it's going to be sloppy basketball. But that's what I want.
Right, right. We'll have to see. It's going to be really interesting. The Spurs could be involved in a lot of deals. Obviously, we had the Kyrie news, but just because, so that's a big domino. But just
Mm-hmm.
because of the nature of the Spurs, the amount of picks that they have and their cap
Cap
space.
space, yeah.
There's a lot of stuff, a lot of different trades that the Spurs could have their hands in. So very interesting to watch. Like we said before this, the rodeo road trip started, and even a little bit before then, after the Sacramento Kings game, doesn't look like the Spurs are going to have a lot of wins here in February. Maybe their only win that they get is this Friday against Detroit. So that's one that
Mm,
you can definitely check out. Tune in Friday. Hopefully, we get some guys back. And that could be one that the Spurs get a win on. But other than that, it's probably going to be tough until the Rockets back to back at the start of March.
mm,
Well,
wonderful.
just some other comments here before we get out of here. Adrian asked, you guys going to do any analysis on draft prospects? We definitely will. That'll probably just be closer to the draft. That may even like not be until the season's done, but we definitely are planning on doing that because this is a big year for Spurs draft for sure. Our man Million earlier said best coverage of Spurs basketball is the voice right here. I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate
Saw
you,
that
Million.
earlier. And then also MEZ says, I told y'all we should have tried to trade for Cam Thomas. Unfortunately, I don't think the Spurs are going to like go after him. But I remember when you said that earlier in the year,
Yeah,
and me and Ethan definitely were, we really liked it. I like him just because he's an LSU guy. Like, I mean,
yeah.
look. Okay, I've made this argument before. I said he was better than Ben Simmons. Now I really feel like he's better than Ben Simmons, dude, because he's gone for 45 and 47 on the
Yeah,
same
dude's
team as
crazy.
him. Right. So and MEZ did say it when he wasn't getting any minutes. Absolutely. So credit to you there, my man. We heard it. So yeah, this is why probably the Nets also aren't that mad about the Kyrie trade.
Mm.
You got a
The
star
Nets,
scoring guard right behind him, dude.
they could continue to make moves, which is kind of crazy. I still like the Nets roster, like as it is right now.
Especially if Cam Thomas keeps playing like this, dude. Oh my gosh.
They got 3 picks that they could potentially flip for Jakob Pertl, Doug
Right.
McDermott.
Right.
I don't
Right.
know. We'll
Maybe
see.
maybe they should just give us Cam Thomas.
I don't think that's going to happen
It's
anymore.
not gonna happen.
That's
No.
their future. If
Shoot.
Kevin just
We really
decides he doesn't
should
want to
have. We
play,
should have tried to swipe him
oh,
before he went off for 50 points in 2+ games, or
if
almost
only.
100 points in
If only.
two nights. Oh Lord. Alrighty. Well, we appreciate you guys. We're gonna be here. We will be here Wednesday, correct?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
we'll be back Wednesday for the post game, so y'all stay tuned for all your Spurs news. I should be putting out some more clips as well from the big live we did. I did one on the case for trading Jakob most recently. We did one on Charles Bassey and Dominic Barlow's potentials as well. So y'all just stay tuned to the channel. We'll have stuff coming out. We appreciate y'all. And if you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe below. Follow us on Twitter at SSPN on YT to watch, at Jude McLaren and at Ethan_Quintero to stay updated. We appreciate y'all. We'll catch y'all on the next one. We'll see y'all later.